Hello and welcome to our Stop Wishing, Start Writing book club. And today we get to talk about this book. And I agree with Oprah. She said it's the best memoir she's ever read. I think it's the best memoir I've ever listened to. And Will said, if you don't fight for what you want, don't cry for what you've lost. And boy, did he fight for what he wants in this book. And so here's how our format works, is that I've selected kind of 4 big ideas from the book with examples of what he did that we can learn as writers, as speakers, about how to make our stories sing, how to make them universally relevant, how to start every chapter with them so that we create a page turner where people can't put the book down because it's just so gosh darn interesting. So let's start with the first 3 pages of this book, because boy, does Will know how to have us at hello. So here we go. And please be thinking, once again, everything here is a metaphor. So we're not just listening to Will's story here. We're thinking about, how do I start my book? Do I just jump into a definable moment where I put people in the scene of something that launched me on this mission, or that catalyzed me to write about this or to study this? Am I giving people insight as to who I am and why I am the way I am, all in the first 3 pages? That's what Will does. So I'll be eager to hear your feedback and how you're doing that in your own work. Here we go, page 1. When I was 11 years old, my father decided he needed a new wall on the front of his shop. It would be a big wall, roughly 12 feet high by 20 feet long. The old wall was crumbling and he was sick of looking at it. Great dialogue, first paragraph, realistic dialogue. But rather than hire a contractor or construction company, he thought it would be a good project for my younger brother, Harry, and me. Daddy-o did the demolition. Alliteration, 4 words, 3 words that were alliterative. Short sentence. I remember looking at that gaping hole in excruciating disbelief. Already a perfect adjective, not just looking at it in disbelief, no, excruciating disbelief. I was utterly certain that there would never be a wall there again. Every day for nearly a year, my brother and I would go to my father's shop after school to work on that wall. We did everything ourselves. We dug the footing, we mixed the mortar, we carried the buckets. By the way, he goes a sentence deeper. Instead of just saying we did everything ourselves and leaving it at that, he goes a sentence deeper to show what he means, so it's not just a surface statement. I still remember the formula: 2 parts cement, 1 part sand, 1 part lime. Harry was in charge of the hose. We'd mix the pile with shovels out on the sidewalk and then fill 2-gallon buckets and lay our separate bricks. We did it without any rebar or wood forms, just one of those levels with the water bubble in the middle. Now, by the way, he didn't say with a level. No, it's with a water a level with the water bubble in the middle, so we can all picture it. So we see what he's saying. And we're still all on the first page. We already have dialogue. We already have vivid detail. We're already in this scene with him. Now, he continues, if you know anything about construction, you know this is a loony ass way to do things. Today, we would just call this Child Protective Services. So he's already in humor on that first page. Mason, I know you would love this. This is your kind of humor, Mason. So now he goes on through the next page. Now I'm going to skip that because I'm going to get to the part that I would love to ask you about. He starts talking about, Daddy-o wouldn't let us stop. Every day we had to be there, making concrete, carrying buckets, laying bricks. It didn't matter if it was raining. It didn't matter if it was hot as hell, if I was mad, if I was sad, if I was sick, if I had a test that next day, there were no excuses. He's creating rhythm. He's creating momentum with this waterfall of words that has an energy to it, once again, that pulls us in because this is such energetic writing. One day, Harry and I were in a particularly stank mood. What a great word, stank. You know, that's a precise word. We were dragging our feet and grumbling, impossible this and ridiculous that. Once again, a sentence deeper. We weren't just grumbling or dragging our feet. It was quotes, impossible this, ridiculous that. Why do we have to build a wall for anyway? We're never going to get it done. Daddy-o overheard us, threw down his tools, and marched over to where we were yapping. He snatched a brick out of my hand and held it up in front of us. Stop thinking about the wall, he said. There is no wall. There are only bricks. Your job is to lay this brick perfectly and then move on to the next brick and then lay that brick perfectly. Then the next one. Don't be worrying about no wall. Your only concern is one brick. Now we pull out of the story a little bit and we use that visual metaphor, just like the oxygen mask, putting it on first, just like Jim Collins getting the right people on the bus. If you're talking about a brick, that is a visual metaphor. Now, how can we hook and hinge it back to the reader? So now it's a metaphorical lesson for life. And it is a metaphorical lesson that was the river that ran through Will's life. The days dragged on, and as much as I hated to admit it, I started to see what he was talking about. When I focused on the wall, the job felt impossible, never ending. But when I focused on one brick, everything got easy. I knew I could lay one damn brick. Now he moves in and he starts extrapolating and expanding this out to his life. He said, for my entire career, I have been absolutely relentless. I have been committed to a work ethic of uncompromising intensity. And the secret to my success is as boring as it is unsurprising. You show up and you lay another brick. Pissed off? Lay another brick. Bad opening weekend? Lay another brick. Album sales dropping? Get up, lay another brick. Marriage failing? Lay another brick. We are not even 3 pages into this book. He put us in the scene with a pivotal turning point story. He pulled out a visual metaphor, and he shared how that has been one of the biggest North Stars of his life. It has defined how he's gotten through the hard times by doing in his life and in his career what he did back there with that wall. So, all right, now that's quite an opening. So I'd love to hear, and if you have a comment, either raise your hand, just go to reactions at the bottom of the screen, raise your hand, or put into chat, Kendra, I have a comment. And Kendra will go ahead and call on you so that we can, instead of having 5 people talk at once or no people talk at once, we'd love to hear your input. So once again, either go down to reaction, raise your hand, Kendra will call on you, or just put into chat, I have a comment, and she'll call on you. So Kendra, who's our first question, please? Okay. Corinne, I think you've got it. Let's hear your input on this.
Okay, great. I absolutely loved this book from the very beginning to the very end, which made me cry. But, you know, it brought up a question for me as a new author to say, okay, the first chapter of my book, or the first paragraph in my book, is called The Seed. And it basically tells the story of my papa crossing the Atlantic Ocean in an ocean liner in 3rd class with the luggage when he was 7 years old. And all he had was a small bag and this desire on the part of his parents to have a better life and create a better life for his future family. Everything was centered around family. And I love the chapter, but I also wondered about your question. Does it really tell, you know, who I am and why? I think it does, but I didn't know if it would be better to talk about a story that related perhaps to negotiation, where I get them right in the room and there's dialogue involved, and I've really worked on that story. And I thought, so what is your take on that?
What a great question. Is that that first, all of us understand the first 2 or 3 pages have a disproportionate impact on whether people get reading, because the jury's out. Keep reading. The jury's out. They're trying to decide, is this book going to be worth it? Does it have me at hello? Is it confusing? Does it have a story? And I'm thinking, wait a minute, I bought a book on negotiation and we're talking about a father coming over on a boat. What's that got to do with anything, right?
Right.
So if you decide, Sam, that story is important to me, then I believe it's important to put you in the story. So maybe there's a time you are a dog with a bone and you won't give up on something. And your mother says, you're just like your grandfather. And maybe you never met your grandfather. And you said, well, I never met him. What do you mean by that? And she said, well, did you know he came over, and it must be in the genes because you have that. Do you see how now you are honoring your heritage? However, you are in the story, and we are getting insight to why you are the way you are and how it's going to be relevant to this topic and how other people can persist or have a dream and achieve it or something too. And you can do all that in 3 pages.
Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Good. Kendra, who's next?
Well, Mason said that he hasn't quite gotten the chance to read the book yet, but he sounds interested based on the first few pages, so he's excited about that.
Okay, well, Mason, I bet that you understand this concept, though, of people spend months, years writing a book, and they focus on sharing their methodology or outlining their steps, etc. And what we're saying is, if the first 3 pages don't grab them, they may never get to the rest of the stuff. All that important, useful information, it may never have the impact it deserves if we don't just get these first 3 pages. So, Mason, what did you do in the first 3 pages of your book?
Well, one, I paid attention to what you taught me a year ago, and that was to capture them. The first 3 pages of the book, I remember sharing with you a joke about the grandmother who was walking with her grandson on the beach, and suddenly the waves got rough and pulled the child away. And through the story, at first you were like taken aback, but then when the punchline hit, you laughed out loud. That's when I moved it from the second chapter to the first page. And I continued and then related it to my experience growing up and the question of what is chutzpah. We all have ideas. So the idea of capturing them in a different way, intriguing them. And I know it worked because I actually got feedback. I remember getting an email from somebody who said, Mason, if your book is as good as the first couple of pages, I know I'm going to love this.
Awesome.
So now I never heard from him again, but that's okay. That's okay.
Okay. Did you hear what Mason just said? That's our goal, because that's what people conclude. Gary Marshall, the director of Pretty Woman, said, what they've learned is laugh early, laugh often, which is why directors of comedies intentionally make sure that the audience laughs in the first 2 minutes, because if they don't, they probably will not laugh thereafter. If they laugh early, then they think, oh, this book is going to be fun or interesting, or it's not going to be hard work or as boring as I thought or whatever. And they're predisposed to like the book and see it as humorous or fun thereafter. Mm-hmm. So here's the question. What are you doing in your first 3 pages? And do people conclude, well, if the rest of the book is like this, I'm golden? Did it put them in the scene of a now I know who you are, where you're coming from, why you are the way you are? And I want that. I value that. And I would love to know how to do it in my life or in my career or in my marriage or in my job. So, okay, let's move on to the next part. Is that you've heard me say before to start every chapter with a story. And Will does that every single chapter. He starts with a put you in the scene story. Here is something, and by the way, a little context about this. I listened to this book first, and I listened to it when I was at the gym. And so with this story, it was set to music. And so I am on the treadmill and I am beaming and laughing out loud. And my son, Andrew, came over and he said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Andrew, I'm at the performance chapter." And he says, "I know exactly what you're talking about," because it had that impact on him as well. So now just imagine gospel music going on in the background. Okay, Sunday morning at Resurrection Baptist Church, and the monotone voice of Reverend Claudius Amaker echoed across the old rickety wooden ceilings, raining down the infallible word of God upon us. My grandmother, Gigi, always dressed up for church. To her, the Sunday presentation of yourself was an intentional act of devotion to the Lord. She wore one of those pristine floral church lady dresses, perfectly accessorized with the church pearls and the church hat with the giant satin flower pinned to it. Now, once again, can't you picture it? It's a few sentences. However, it's so precise that if we've ever seen anyone dressed like that, we're right there in the church next to her. During the sermons, she'd fan herself, eyes closed, shaking her head in agreement, chiming in, "Preach, Pastor, say it again," or just not, mm-hmm. Every once in a while, she would look down at me, checking to make sure I was paying attention. But I was just 9 years old. People clapped and swayed and cried and prayed. Now, by the way, that's not an accident. Swayed and prayed rhyme. And by selecting those two specific words, he made that musical. When we use rhyme, it is sublime because it's remembered over time. So all the while, my 9-year-old mind couldn't help but wonder when this service was going to be over. Except every third Sunday when the visiting Reverend Ronald West would take the pulpit. Reverend Amaker was our home pastor, and he would talk about the power of God. But all I heard was the voice of the adults in Charlie Brown. Wah, 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 wah. Reverend West, though, would show you God's power. He wore stylish red glasses with a matching three-piece suit, punctuated with the standard bleach white Baptist pocket hanky. He was 6'3", 210 pounds of God's glory. And do not let him near your piano, because after Reverend West played it, you could just wheel that thing out to the trash. Now, is Will having fun writing this? You know, it's like Robert Frost said, no joy in the writer, no joy in the reader. You know that Will, now this was a long time ago, he's 9 years old, but he put himself back in that scene and he's describing it with vivid detail. He's recapturing how it felt, and he's using intentionally delightful language so that we are brimming with a delight over this image that so now that was just the calm before the storm. Slowly he would transform, allowing the music to carry him into a trance. Tears would fill his eyes, sweat building on his brow as he rummaged for his hanky to clear the fog from his glasses. The drums, the bass, the voices all rising at his command as if imploring the Holy Spirit to show itself. And then, just like clockwork, an ecstatic crescendo, and boom, the Holy Ghost fills the room, and Reverend West explodes from his seat, kicking over the stool, both hands possessed, banging in praise on the piano. Then with a guttural roar, he blazes across the stage to the three-tiered electric organ, demanding that it do what God intended it to do, swirling massive orchestral Baptist chords, all the while sweat flying, the congregation erupting, singing, dancing, old women passing out in the aisles, weeping, Reverend West pointing, directing, never once losing control of the choir and the band until his body would collapse in surrender and gratitude for the merciful bliss of God's love. As the music settled, Gigi returned to her seat, dabbing tears from her eyes, and my little heart pounding, not even sure what that sweet vibration was inside my body. All I could think was, I want to do that. I want to make people feel that. Boom. 2 pages. He took you to church, didn't he? Literally and figuratively. Notice grammar went out the window, because if we want people to feel, we often experience things and run on sentences, right? We don't have, correct language with periods and with prepositional phases. No, it happens like that. It's pouring out of you. Boom, boom, boom. You get swept up in it. And now, once again, what's the point of this? He experienced something and he said, I want to do that. I want to make people feel like that. That's in italics with the that capitalized, so it pops off the page. And even if you were skimming this book, your eyes would be drawn to that epiphany, that revelation, which was his point. So back to you, people. It's like, do you put us in a scene where you had that type of emotional energy, where you were scared to death, whether you were thrilled to death, whether you found your calling, whether something was so above and beyond that you were swept up in it? And did you know that's my life mission? That's how I want to make people feel. That's how I want to feel. Because if you tell a story like that early in the book, once again, not only do you have people at hello, you're going to keep them turning the pages, because this is riveting writing. Okay, so comments, questions from you, input about how you were affected by his stories and whether you have something like that in your own work. So once again, if you just joined us, please raise your hand, go down to reactions and raise your little hand there, or just put into chat. Kendra, I have something to say, and she'll call on you. So Kendra, who's next, please?
We don't have anyone yet.
Okay, then here's what we're going to do, because we want to rock and roll with this. And so maybe I ask a question and that particular question doesn't resonate with you. So as I say something, maybe you think, oh, well, you haven't even talked about this part of the book. And that's the part of the book that I really found fascinating. Or, my takeaway hasn't even come up yet. What I'm going to do differently as a writer because of that book is this. So one thing, if you are putting your book on audio, then a couple of clues is that I know, because I have some kind of behind the scene info on this, he didn't sit down while he read this book. He stood up the entire time. And the reason is that when we're sitting down, it's kind of passive energy. And it's hard to get across the energy of that kind of seat when you're of that kind of scene, when you're in the passive position of sitting. So I suggest you read your book out loud. I suggest it's at eye level. I suggest that we read it in advance, and that before we start reading it, we put ourselves back in that situation and we remember what it felt, or we remember how angry we were at that person, or remember how much we were dreading that situation, so that we feel the emotion that was in that scene. So we're not just getting the words right, we're getting the emotion right. All right, let's go on to another part of the book. Is that I think one of the reasons that Oprah said it was the best memoir she ever read was how honest it was. Is that Will got ugly. He admitted the parts about himself that he was not proud of. He shared the really tough and vulnerable moments. And because he went first, because the book was raw and real, he gave us permission to go there as well. And instead of being up on a pedestal, he shared some really challenging times that had him on his knees. So let's tell, in particular, a story. It's on page 354. And this is where Will's marriage is on the rocks to Jada. And he talks about how because of the way he grew up, he was determined to be the best dad. He was determined to be the best husband. He was not only determined to be the #1 box office star in the world, and you may remember in the book, he was very pragmatic about that. His dream was to be the #1 box office star. So what did he do? He studied the benchmarks, all right? What are the top 10 grossing movies? What elements do they have in common? And I will only accept roles that give me an opportunity to do that, that movies have that theme because they are the blockbusters. Now, who are the top 10 current stars? And what do they do and what don't they do? Because I am going to eliminate the trial and terror learning by, if they got pigeonholed, then even if I got, Bad Brothers 3 and it was going to be a lot of money, I would not do that because I knew it would pigeonhole me and I knew that it would block that process. So he really studied, and all of his life, back in alignment with that quote I used to start us off, when he said, if you don't fight for what you want, don't cry for what you've lost. So he fought all of his life to be the best at what he did. He was a pleaser and he was a prover. So when it came time for Jada's birthday party, he went above and beyond because his goal was to make it the best doggone birthday party that not only she'd ever had, but that anyone had ever had. And he invited all of her best friends. He had a 20-yard long flowered archway. He brought in one of the top chefs in the world. He brought in Mary J. Blige, who killed it at the Super Bowl on Sunday, by the way. And he went back to her childhood home with a camera crew, and he interviewed the people in the home and asked if he could bring the camera crew in the house so that she could go down memory row. So anyway, now we go to the part where he says, the audience was roaring. People could not believe the lengths I'd gone to. I heard folks saying, I've never seen anything like this before. What is he going to do next year? And I still wasn't finished. The room grew silent as Jada's beloved grandmother began to speak. The recordings had been directed to specific family members, many of whom were in the crowd. And for the first time since her passing, Jada was hearing the voice of her grandmother speaking directly to her. Now, I had seen the video that I had created 100 times at this point, so I wasn't even watching the video. I was just watching Jada. The entire place is in tears. Her family, my family, everybody except Jada. She sat motionless, refusing to make eye contact with me. The video ended and everyone erupted in a standing ovation, except Jada. We went back to the hotel room and Jada still hadn't said anything, not a thank you, not a I loved it, nothing. She took a shower and I just sat there and waited. And after about 30 minutes, she emerged from the bathroom and she said, I don't want to do anything tomorrow, so you can just cancel whatever it is you had planned. I was dumbfounded. Okay, I said, stifling my disappointment. It's late, but why don't we wait until tomorrow and we can see how you feel then? The next day, I had scheduled a group painting lesson with one of her favorite painters, one of the most famous painters in the world, who I had flown in specifically for this event. I'm telling you how I feel now. I don't want to do it, Jada said. But you don't know what it is, so you can't know if you want to do it or not. It's my birthday. Just cancel it, Jada snapped. Well, cancel it in the morning. Just go to sleep and we'll see how you feel in the morning. Cancel it now, she shrieked. What the hell is your problem? I asked her. That was the most disgusting display of ego I have ever seen in my life, she said. Ego? Ego? You're the most ungrateful woman. I ain't. And back and forth they went. Now, I think our strength taken to an extreme is our Achilles heel. And we go back to laying brick in the first 3 pages, where Will learned if you just work hard enough, you can become the #1 rap star. You can become the #1 box office star. You can marry a beautiful woman that you used to dream about. You can have kids. You can put on the best birthday party in the world if you just fight hard for it, if you're just clear about it. And then the one person he wanted to impress, the one person he wanted to enjoy it, didn't enjoy it. His strength taken to an extreme was his comeuppance and his Achilles heel. And Will was honest enough to share that in a way that we too ask, where have we thought if we just fight hard for something that it will lead to success? If we just try hard enough with someone, then they will love us or we can make them happy. Ain't necessarily so. So where in your book do you share something really honest, a comeuppance, where you thought you were doing the right thing, you were trying really hard, and it had the exact opposite effect? So comments, things you'd like to bring up. And once again, either raise your hand or put in chat that you'd like to say something. Love to hear from you.
And there.
Okay.
Okay. Well, first of all, that whole scenario was making me think of the golden rule, treat other people the way you think they want to be treated, versus the platinum rule, you treat people the way they want to be treated. And I thought that was a great vulnerability. He put in a year's worth of work into that. It made me think that I probably should add a story in my book on entrepreneurism of when I celebrated my 20th anniversary. And I don't have this story down just right, but I remember being on stage. There were 150 people there, and I had all I was looking at was my husband's eyes. My family was in the back of the room, which is the first time that happened. And my husband he's amazing. We've been married 36 years, but he looks through the lens. He's a finance guy. And I was like, it was such a journey to get those people in that seat. I had never had that big of an event. And the pitching of what was going to happen next, like I was talking to them about a mastermind. Well, the majority of those people in there, that wasn't the right thing to offer them probably. And so, it live and learn. But I remember feeling like in his eyes, maybe it was a failure. And it gets me emotional just thinking about it. But so I made a note in this book about crafting a story about that. So it still needs some work, but it made me think of it. And it's interesting when you have a long relationship that so much of the value of things is taken through the eyes of your loved one. And I'm a pleaser too. I've had to learn those lessons. So I really related to the story.
Mm-hmm. I think all of us, and now some of us, we're not writing memoirs, we're writing nonfiction books. And yet if we get everything right all the time, I learned this lesson. Someone came up to me after a Tung Fu workshop and said, Sam, do you ever do anything wrong? And I realized I was telling stories where I'd been able to turn things around, or here's the right way or a better way to say it. And I had not put in enough comeuppance stories where I had done things wrong and I had hurt people, or I had said something I wish I hadn't. And I really think that our books need a balance so that we come down the pedestal. I know a very popular phrase is our mess is our success. And I think that if we are purposeful in sharing a lesson learned that was painful, and what we took away from it in an effort to prevent that from other people, or to let them know they're not alone. We all mess up or get it wrong, that people bond over that. In another class, I shared about Sherry Turkle, SherryTurkle. Sherry's book, The Empathy Diaries, was just selected as the top memoir. Will probably get it this year, 2022, Sherry Turkle, who's an MIT professor, got it last year for 2021. And I had an opportunity to interview Sherry Turkle, and I asked her a question that I know every memoirist brought up at Maui Writers Conference is, what is the thing you think you can't say? Say it. Because the more intimate we are, the more universal we are. And the one thing we think is too raw, we can't possibly say it. That it is when we say that people know that this is not a book that was designed to be pretty. It was a book that was designed to connect and to resonate and to hopefully be a pebble in the pond so people know they're not alone. What Sherry shared in that book was that her mother took her away from her father and never explained why. And she really actively resented her mother for most of her life. And toward the end of her mom's life, she was giving, I think, a commencement address, maybe at Vanderbilt, I'm not sure. However, her mom was there to see her speak and was walking in front of her. And Sherry said, maybe it was the tension of the moment or whatever, but came out of my mouth, Mom, everyone can see the bobby pins in your hair. This is so humiliating. Can't you do anything about it? And she never had an opportunity to apologize to her mom about that. And then after her mom was gone, she found out, she got back, she tracked down her dad, and she found out that why her mother had taken her away from her dad was that her dad was performing science experiments on her, that he would lock her in a closet for 48 hours to see what would happen. He would do this to see what would happen. And that New York Times gave her book, The Empathy Diaries, a glowing review. And Sherry said one of the reasons is because she dared to say that unpretty truth and to say something that deeply gutted, and she couldn't wrap it up with a bow. There was no way to apologize and make it better. She just needed to live with that. And in sharing that story, she hoped that other people would perhaps think twice before they say something that they couldn't take back or wouldn't have a chance to apologize for.
Sam,
All right. Yes.
Colette had a comment.
Oh, good. Let's hear, please.
Hi, Sam. I also saw your interview on Gaia, I think with Lisa Gar. Suggested that I may like to watch it, so I laughed. And I loved your pink hair, by the way. It looked great. So it's interesting because I write a lot about healing, and then part of being authentic in this writing is I go through programs or groups of it, because I know someone was talking and they compared it to, like, if you're going to write about this, do it from your own experience. Otherwise, it's like being a vegan butcher. And so if you have and it's funny because today I got this email, and I always share, and I'll share something, or if something resonates, like even Will's story. I've lived this experience where you think you can make someone else happy and it doesn't work. And so this woman wrote me this super email, like thanking me so much for the share and how much it impacted her. And I can't for the life of me remember what it was I shared that affected her. But I always find this is the gold in that there's always that moment that's like, okay, I'm going to take my clothes off, and then it does help someone. And that's.
I'm so glad you said, what a great phrase, a vegan butcher. I think that's what you said. It's like, and by the way, thank you for mentioning that Gaia interview I did with Lisa Gar. That was right after I went to Burning Man. So 5 days after Burning Man, I was rocking the pink hair for my TEDx talk on Someday. And 5 days later, I was rocking the Gaia set with Lisa Gar with the pink hair. So, okay. And I need to honor our time. So of the many lessons learned, I had put some on our Facebook community about put down the snow globe. And it was such a wonderful example about people coming from different places and reacting to a situation and misinterpreting it because they came from different cultures. And the party at Quincy Jones, where it was do it now or do it never. Once again, these are all universally relevant metaphors. And there's one, let's see, on page 402, that is what another shining example of how to do this in a way that resonates with everyone. Is that okay? We are on page 402. And What Will had said earlier, and throughout the book, he does what are called callbacks. Comedians use these, is they'll introduce something and then they'll circle back to it again, and then they'll circle back to it again. And it's very satisfying for the reader because it adds continuity to the book. And oh yeah, I know that. Oh yeah, I remember that. So it keeps people embedded in the book. And earlier in the book, he talked about his love for his grandmother, Gigi, and that she had this smile, this secret Mona Lisa smile, like she knew something he didn't. And it was always a mystery through the book. And when he met Nelson Mandela had that smile. And like he knew something that no one else did. And Will tells another thing about himself is that he tells the Quincy Jones story about do it now or do it never. And then he loops back to when he met Nelson Mandela, and Nelson Mandela made a very honest offer to him to come back and spend time with him. And he didn't do it now, and he did it never. And he said it's one of the great regrets of his life that he questioned that invitation, that he thought he can't mean this, he's a busy man. And that in retrospect, he realizes that Nelson Mandela never would have made that offer if he hadn't fully meant it. And what a golden opportunity it was. And he did not do it at the moment. And he ended up doing it never. But now let's loop back to the smile. He said, when my beloved Gigi passed, I got my first true glimpse into the secret of the smile. I had held a miscomprehension around the physics of ultimate happiness. I had thought that I could gain and win and achieve and conquer and acquire and succeed my way to love and happiness. 8 consecutive #1 hit movies, 30 million records, 4 Grammys, hundreds of millions of dollars. It makes you happy, right? It makes people love you, right? And the fundamental flaw of this theory is the belief that the smile comes from outside, that it is acquired or achieved from external sources or conditions, and that someone will love you so much, they will adore you so deeply and thoroughly, that they will fill you with the bliss of the smile. Spoiler alert. There are no relationships, there are no careers, and there are no houses with a name that can fill the hole. There is nothing you can receive from the material world that will create inner peace or fulfillment. The truth is that the smile is generated through output. It's not something you get, it's something you give. And in the end, it will not matter one single bit how well they loved you. You will only gain the smile based on how well you loved them. Talk about the penultimate, right? He takes us along how he learned that lesson the hard way, that having a big house and all those movies and all that money and all of that never resulted in the smile. Once again, a visual metaphor, not just the word happiness. No, his anchored in a signature story, a visual sign of it that he wanted and could never figure out. And then toward the end of the book, he finally figures it out. So, question, in your book, do you come back full circle? Something was a mystery. There was a quest at the beginning. There was something you were seeking, something that you wanted. And along the way, what did you learn? And what was the penultimate life message? What do you know for sure? What, after all of that, have you gotten clarity about? Because if you have that toward the end of the book, it is a well-earned finished, where we have taken people along the journey, we have shared our truth, and it has hopefully catalyzed a truth in them as well. And that's, folks, how you write a great memoir. Kudos to Will and to Mark Manson, who wrote it with him. So I need to honor our time promise. So if there's any other comments, please put them in our Facebook group. You know, maybe you didn't have a chance to share a story that you felt particularly meaningful, or maybe reading that book or listening to it informed the way you're going to write from now on, so that you are using stories with metaphorical insights that no matter who the person is, they can relate it to their life. I really enjoyed this. I hope that you join us on, I think it's March 2nd, isn't it, Kendra? When we're going to have our Inside the Author Studio interview with Mike Wine. Now, Mike won Ironman Triathlon, Boston Marathon, New York City Marathon, and the Disney Marathon, all in the same year, all in his age group, and his age group is 70. He's 70, folks. So Mike has written a book called The Specific Edge, and he'll be the first to tell you that he was not a jock growing up. He was always the kid picked last for the team. And here he is at 70-year-old, a world-class athlete. And he's going to talk not just about his book, how you as an author can figure out what your specific edge is. What's your competitive advantage? What can you do well that no one else can do, hopefully to achieve the kind of meaningful success that he is, both in his personal life and his professional life. So I'm Sam Horn. I hope that you have found this interesting and useful, and start reading our next book, James Clear's Atomic Habits, which is probably, more people have told me that book has had a life-changing impact on them than any book I've heard in the last 10 years. So it's worth a read or worth a listen. See you March 2nd for our Inside the Authors interview with Mike Wine. And for now, right on.